I feel honored to be invited to this special event about inclusive education in South Africa. The movement towards inclusive school is gaining momentum worldwide, and there is no doubt that inclusivity will characterize the schools in the next few decades. This means that learners presenting with a wide variety of characteristics, including those with special needs and disability, will receive their education alongside ordinary learners in educational settings which are in their neighborhoods, just as the national and international commitments require. The implication is that teachers, trained or not trained in inclusive education, will teach learners with a wide range of characteristics, abilities, and needs, and they will ensure that those children succeed. Inclusive education is socially justified on the grounds that it will promote respect, dignity for all, social cohesion, and ultimately inclusive society. Such schools are effective means for combating discriminatory attitudes, creating welcoming communities, and building inclusive societies, as well as achieving quality education. The movement is also justified for facilitating access to education for all. By access, I do not mean physical access only. I also mean access to the learning content and also achievement. Nations believe that educational access to all will break the cycle of poverty, mortality rate, and HIV infection in most developing countries. And studies have reported academic benefits to all learners, including those who are receiving education in segregated educational settings. The research that we have just finished on the state of inclusive education in South Africa reveals that teachers are reluctant to teach all children in ordinary classes. Some prefer to have them included in non-academic activities only. Teachers have negative attitude and stereotypes about differences, especially children with disabilities. You still find teachers saying, this child is like a case. And some teachers have even expressed strong beliefs that investing in education for learners with certain types of disabilities is a waste of money. And when these children are placed in ordinary schools, they receive treatment that is unequal to their non-disabled counterparts. And in addition, they are labeled, they are stigmatized, and they become recipients of bullying. Again, we also found that hugely on physical access to school, but what is taking place in the classroom is ignored. And we found that active participation in education is undermined by factors such as poor resources and low literacy rate. And it is also undermined by teenage pregnancy, by gender-based violence. All these factors contribute to absenteeism, to high failure and dropout rate. Having said that, I would like us to talk about the South African perspectives about inclusivity. And I am going to use 7 languages in South Africa to demonstrate how inclusivity is expressed. I will start with Tshivenda. In Tshivenda, when they speak about inclusivity, they talk about Tanganeza, which means acceptance. Some will say Farisanani, meaning pulling or holding together. And others will say Ucheneza, meaning bringing in. People who speak Sitsonga will say Angara, meaning to accommodate or to embrace. Some will say Katsakanya, meaning combine, bringing together. and while others will say amukela, meaning accept or welcome. In isiXhosa, they will speak about ukuhlanganisa, meaning bringing together, or they will say indibaniso, meaning togetherness, or they will say ukumananya, meaning unite. And isiZulu, we will hear people saying ukuhlanganisa or hlanganani, meaning to merge or to unite. Others will say umbambana, meaning to hold together. In Sotho, which is my language, we will say hlakanya, kopanya, or akareja, meaning aiding, uniting, embracing, welcoming, or mixing. The meaning to be extrapolated from these languages spoken in South Africa can be summed as follows. It means being welcomed or accepted with respect. In this light, a child is accepted unconditionally irrespective of his or her attributes. These expressions are traceable in the African moral principle of Ubuntu. This moral takes as its priority the human needs, interest, and dignity of individuals, and it features three broad aspects, which is humanness, interdependence, and communalism. And these three elements are reflected in ideas behind inclusive education. Just to take you through all those aspects, let us now look at humanness. In my language, we'll say Ubuntu. This value espouses desirable and appropriate human conduct. It describes that human beings should see each other as valuable creatures to be treated with dignity and respect, irrespective of their characteristics or attributes. Therefore, anything that undermines or hurts, threatens, and destroys human beings is frowned upon, since it tampers with the very foundation of society. Essentially, this aspect rejects exclusions or discriminations and considers such practices as disrespectful, unacceptable, disturbing harmony and development of proper relationships. The second one, which is interdependence, is that the view of human beings as isolated beings is not in line with an African lifestyle. Hence, we talk about motho ke motho ka ba bang. The message is that individuals are seen as an integral part of society. In this way, an African child is born into a world consisting of people who are connected, not necessarily by blood. And this makes the child a brother, a sister, nephew, a niece, or a grandchild of many people in his village. In this network of relationships, children come to know that they are receivers of widespread attention, and this makes them aware that they have the right to be protected, to receive support from all relatives, as well as to stay in solidarity to their own members. The child becomes aware that he should be treated in the same way as others. Therefore, any practice leading to her or him being treated differently from his peers will frustrate him. And in fact, it constitutes a violation of his or her rights. And it also constitutes denial of support. And the third one, which is communalism, implies that the community is more important than the individual. The concept is important in understanding the way problems are dealt within the African community. We always talk about two heads are better than one. Therefore, the responsibility for educating children should not be shifted to only one person. It cannot be the responsibility of the teacher only. It should be a collective effort with the community members, including adults who do not have formal education. In Africa, we say it takes the village to raise a child. Having said that, I want to take you through inclusive education in South African education policy, how it is reflected in the educational policy on inclusion, which is the white paper number 6. The white paper number 6 is talking about all children and youth. It says all children and youth can learn and they need support. It says learners differ in terms of age, gender, ethnicity, language, class, disability, or health status. It also says learners' needs and human experience are unique, and therefore they should be respected and equally valued. The needs of all learners must be met by educational systems. A closer look at this, there is an emphasis on all. There's also emphasis on uniqueness of each learner. There's also it also positions the responsibility for educating all learners to educational institutions which are located in the child's neighborhood. Let us look closely at the term all learners. Clearly, it is not saying specific type of learners. It is saying all learners. The term all learners signifies the value of each child as an individual, implying that no child is special than the other. This value relates very well with the principle of humanness, that is the Ubuntu, which condemns any form of discrimination and espouses equality in terms of treatment of children. The idea, therefore, is to ensure full and successful development of each and every learner, irrespective of their attributes. No one should be denied access and participation in schools, and this is in line with the contents of the Salamanca Statement, which requires all schools to respond to the educational needs of all children, regardless of their differences, in terms of physical, intellectual, social, emotional, linguistic, or other conditions. The statement further clarifies, I'm referring to the Salamanca Statement. It further clarifies the definition of all children, as it states that this should include disabled and gifted learners, street and working children, children from remote or nomadic populations, children from linguistic, ethnic or cultural minorities, and children from disadvantaged or marginalized areas or groups. It is therefore clear that behind a focus on all children, there is an acknowledgement that every learner can learn, implying that individuals are born with abilities and potentials that need to be developed if they are to experience success. The principle further reveals that all children need support. The implication is that life is not stable, and it is full of complications which each child may experience at any time in his or her life. The occurrence of such an incident may disturb the child's equilibrium and ultimately his or her functioning. Therefore, support should not be thought of as involving fixing or remediating or correcting an individual's functioning as it used to be. Rather, it should be understood as involving guidance, leadership, nurturance, and development of all learners to their full potential. And this stands in contrast with the special needs or disability notions, in the sense that the support will not be focused on few individuals who fit into the disability or special need category. The focus on all learners is clearly an acknowledgement that learners are not the same, and in fact learner differences are expected and they should be welcomed as strengths. Let us look again on this issue of respect and equal value of children's uniqueness. The uniqueness of children. Uniqueness of children implies that no children are alike, nor are they socialized to view life in the same way. Therefore, their idiosyncratic characteristics should be equally respected rather than being used as excuses for exclusions. Respect for differences should be translated into acceptance and equal treatment for all. Equal treatment of all. Respect and acceptance means valuing children for who they are and appreciating what they bring, nurturing what they are capable of doing, anticipating what they might need, and offering the best one can do in order to enhance their development. This principle aims to facilitate access to education for children, for all children. This explicitly renders education a right, not a favor. The principle of uniqueness of each child finds relevance in the African principle of interdependence, particularly children's socialization about their position in the society, their right to receive protection, guidance, and support from every adult in the community, and also to be treated like others. The next one is the needs of learners. It says the needs of learners must be met by educational systems which are located in the child's neighborhood. This means that the responsibility of educating children lies entirely with the education system. All children will fit in integrated educational institutions to be educated by adults who are capable to do so. Surely this does not mean only teachers with formal education, but also parents form part of educational system and other professionals and stakeholders. This is so because children should be developed holistically, and no one professional can do so without support, and every child is capable of learning. However, they may do so in different ways and pace because they are different. This principle should be understood alongside the principle of quality education, because education is defined so if it facilitates growth in an individual in terms of cognitive, emotional, and creative capacity. Thus, it should promote personal development. It should strengthen respect for human rights and freedom, and it should enable individuals to participate effectively in a free society. Quality education should be understood in terms of its relevance to the child's local context and preparation to the world of work. Relevance to the local context means taking into consideration of the child's worldviews. Anything that undermines his epistemology will destroy his self-identity and will deny him or her growth. Once more, this relates to an African value of communalism, in the sense that education is a communal effort offered by all adults in their community. In conclusion, I just want to indicate that I hoping that this presentation will help you embrace inclusive education. It will make you realize that inclusive education is not anything new in Africa. Thank you very much. And over to you, Maps.
over to me, but you are also joining us right here. Thank you so much for all those words. Of course, we had you just a few moments ago doing that just to ensure that we didn't have any technical issues. And we're able to have Professor Phasha right in the studio with us just to ask her a few questions. Professor Phasha, just once again, is a professor at the University of South Africa in the Department of Inclusive Education, and she was actually the first chair of that particular department, and you're the former chair of that department now, but still passionate about it, and of course loving exactly what you do. And we can see the passion coming through in your presentation, that this is something that is fundamental really to changing education as much as possible so that all are included. Yeah?
Thank you. Yes, of course, everybody has to be included. We deserve to be educated. We deserve to teach all the children. It is our responsibility, in fact. Yeah.
How can young teachers call on Ubuntu to overcome the increasing education exclusion being caused by the pandemic?
I think I've already explained that, but there's a point that I really want to emphasize, that I wish our teacher can draw, that I think teacher can draw on, and that is the issue of how we are dealing with problems within the African culture. You know, that thing of communalism. We need to work together. We need to work as a unit. So if teachers can work together as a unit, as a team, they can be able to support each other. And then they can also be able to get support from parents, from families, from the community. And they can also be, I mean, in that way, a child can be able to get, to get education. Yeah, that is what I want to emphasize, how we work in the African culture.
What have you found are the biggest pedagogical issues that we're having in terms of making it inclusive right now? What are the biggest challenges in our way in South Africa?
Oh, okay. Right now, we have problems with teachers who are not adequately trained to teach inclusively. And their attitudes toward inclusive education and also towards children who are different from the norm is very problematic. You find teachers who still call other children cases, like, ma'am, I have a case in my class, referring to a child who's having a disability, or ma'am, I'm having a child who's a stubborn. We don't want to hear that. It shows that people have got a negative attitude towards people who are different from the norm. And again, there's a problem of resources in our communities, in our schools. Those problems make it very difficult for children to have enough resources or teaching, assistive technology or media that can help them access a curriculum. We do have parents who do not want to participate in activities in the schools. So that makes it very difficult for teachers to work. Teachers need support. So if they do not get support from parents who know the children very well, it becomes problematic. So, and sometimes teachers do not even get support from the district officials. You find that some of the district officials are actually not well trained in this field. So they are not able to provide adequate support to teachers. We do have problems with safety in the schools. There's a lot of bullying. There is a lot of gender-based violence in the schools. There's a lot of killings in schools. So those type of problems are making education very difficult to be accessible to those people who are being targeted. Yeah, and then
and just on that, we were having a discussion the other day around the same topic, and you're actually finding that in many communities there are blind students who are being victims of numerous, if not most of them, had been raped
Yes.
because they're easy targets, and it's just something that seems to be perpetuating in many communities.
Exactly. That is a very serious problem.
Yeah.
It does not only affect children who are visually impaired or
Yeah.
who are blind, also children who are having mental challenges,
Yeah.
mental, let me say here, intellectual disabilities.
Yes.
They are victims of rape, victims of all those kind of problems. So we know that a person who has been through rape, and they do have problems with concentration in classes, you know, and that makes it very difficult for them to grasp everything that the teacher is teaching. Yeah. So yeah.
And I think in that case, fundamentally, the question is, how do you actually, at the root, rather focus on humanizing those with accessibility issues or challenges before you can even do anything else? Because, you know, I think it's that dehumanization that seems to really encourage more and more issues around it and making it more difficult environmentally for them to be able to get the inclusivity that they deserve.
I'm not sure if I follow you.
Well, humanizing, yes? I mean, humanizing around the fact that, you know, what we've alluded to is the fact that they almost are treated as, you know, a lesser in a way. And that's probably where the fundamental issue stems from.
Yes. Remember, these are the people who have been marginalized in the past, and they still have problems of getting access to the education.
Yes.
And they experience this type of problems, and they actually experience, it becomes actually a double disadvantage on their side. So that is why it is important for school to actually address such kind of problems, such as safety, and just to ensure that such kind of learners are getting access to education, and they succeed.
Education comes with a number of challenges itself, and it can be, as a whole, in educational systems, quite exclusive from a language point of view.
Yes.
You know, you find that now you are judged on your level of intelligence because of your ability to understand English and communicate in English and be educated in English. And I saw you really highlight the different languages that make it so important for us to be able to communicate in. You pretty much addressed unity and togetherness across all our 11 languages, and that was really important to stress the fact that you know, educating in all our African languages is something that's quite important, right?
It is very important. Remember that we've got a lot of children who have been labeled as having learning disabilities because they are learning in a language which is not their own.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so actually the point that I want to emphasize is that language is our culture. Language defines who we are. So if your language is included, you're allowed to learn in your own language. Your culture or your own identity is like, you feel like it's acknowledged. And that actually boosts your self-esteem. It makes you feel confident about yourself. And another thing is that if you are learning, if you're using your own language to learn, you access the learning material, the learning content. You follow everything that the teacher is teaching in the classroom, and it becomes very easy for you to participate actively in the learning activities, and you achieve.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, language is another thing that has been used to marginalize people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to make education inaccessible. So I believe that if we can be allowed to use our own languages, I think you will realize that we are all rocket scientists. We can
Yes.
all be rocket scientists.
Absolutely.